everybody. Welcome to Frontiers in Navigation. My name is Muenster-Nuiry, and I'm told because of the background noise I'll speak a little slower than I usually do. I am the Vice President and Client Executive here in Los Angeles for the Xerox Transportation Group. And my transportation group is very shortly going to become a $6.5 billion startup called Conduent. And we're actually opening up the New York Stock Exchange on January 2nd. Here in California, Xerox is part of a global transportation group. We manage the tolling operations here in Los Angeles, parking operations, we're involved in transit, and we're involved in trucking here as well. And we do this nationwide as well as internationally. So today we're going to explore new innovations and ideas for navigation. And we think that navigation is really changing. Primarily, it's becoming more voice-enabled. It's more contextual. I think people want to know not only where they're going, but where's a parking space? How can I pay for it? Where's the next EV charging station? I use Waze in Los Angeles every day. I also use the Go LA app, which is a Xerox app. It's a trip navigator. But if you can imagine living in this city, which is one of the most congested cities in the country and probably in the world, navigation systems are like eating or drinking Coke. You know, everybody does it. Maybe not so much Coke, but anymore. But as a consumer, I want fast, accurate information, and I want safe information. So I think we're really going to explore what navigation is going to look like in the future and how it will fit with the autonomous cars. So we're pleased to have four very distinguished gentlemen here who work in the forefront of the navigation industry. I'd like to introduce the panel who will in turn about their ideas and what they see is happening. And actually, I don't mean to, I got my back to you guys. Talk with us about what they think about this new transportation infrastructure. So I'd first like to introduce Hans Hiebl. There's Hans. Executive Vice President, Infotainment and Connectivity for Continental. And then our next panelist is Kip Dodlinger, who works for Garmin as the Product and UIX Manager. Kip. Jan-Maarten, Vries was Vice President, Product Management and Marketing Automotive for TomTom. And Giles Rhys Johns, who's the CMO for What 3 Words. So we're going to turn it over to Hans and take it away.
Okay. Do you have the...
I don't have anything. Oh, there's the clicker.
Okay. Thank you, Anne. So, a vehicle which is driving automatically needs a perfect understanding of the environment where it is driving. I would like to talk about the dynamic e-horizon, which is going to provide perfect additional information compared to what we have in the vehicle today to ensure a safe and on-time drive. What do we have today in the vehicle? We have sensors like ultrasonic sensors for the near range, cameras, radar systems. There's going to be LiDAR very soon. We have maps that have been grown in content. So we have lots of detailed information also about traffic situation. We have information about where the next Starbucks is, where the cheapest gas is around the corner. However, thinking further, what do we need as a next step to improve today's vehicles regarding safety and to get us closer to fully automatic driving? We see that the range today is around 300 meters with radar. We don't see around curves. We don't see beyond hills. Maps need to be more precise as they are today. They need to be very reliable, and they need to be always up to date. When you get updates every 1 or 2 years right now, this is certainly not sufficient to provide information that is needed for automated driving. So we see that there is a need to upgrade compared to what we have today. How can we achieve that? The basic idea is crowdsourcing, using data that are already available in a lot of cars today that provide assisted driving. Lots of cars do have cameras, do have radar sensors. The idea is now to take part of those informations, bring them up to a cloud, analyze the data, compare with the most up-to-date map information which is there, and update then certain tiles of the map with the newest information. And then this information is going to be broadcast for all vehicles that can use that with different means. That sounds pretty straightforward. Where's the problems? Problems are to implement that in a large scale to manage the data. So we had a question in the session before about connectivity. Today connectivity means mostly there is a 4G connection to the vehicle. We certainly need to improve that. We will get higher reliability with 5G. We will have shorter latency times. However, there will still be situations where the vehicle will not have a cellular connection. So the next steps here are, we are actively working on leveraging other means of communication. Like in the urban areas, there is lots of Wi-Fi hotspots right now. Also in suburban areas. So the coverage with Wi-Fi is going to expand, and we can use that. And going beyond that, we are also working on other broadcast technologies, maybe upgrading today's infrastructure in some areas, so that there is 2, maybe 3 channels between the car and the cloud to increase the level of availability and reliability of that information. The other topic which is still to be developed is filtering the data that are generated in the core. You may have heard yesterday from Intel that there's going to be 4,000 gigabytes of data every day generated in the core. That's too much for 10 channels from the core to the backend. So we need to have an intelligent filtering mechanism to make sure that only relevant data and data that can be used, that is verified, are sent to the backend. So with that, we believe that a lot of additional functionalities will be enabled, not just for the automated car. Also today we see that every year there is 1.2 million fatal accidents globally, 35,000 alone in the US. And according to NHTSA, 94% of those are caused by human error. Human error means not paying the necessary attention, judging a traffic situation not in the right way. And this is where we believe we can take a little step towards improving that further. For example, here in this picture you see that major accident around the curve, driver not being attentive, wouldn't say playing on the cell phone, maybe doing something else, looking somewhere else. The best way, we think, to get immediate attention of the driver, even before emergency braking takes action, is an audible information like, hey Dave, take care, brake, there's a problem around the curve. Functional audio is what we mean with controlling all the audible sources in the vehicle with one controller, not a beep from here and music from there and another warning chime from a different system, really controlling that, so that in case of such an emergency, really the system only provides the warning message. And ideally also showing where the danger is. Is it left front, right front? Is there something coming from rear? Somebody overtaking and getting into a dangerous situation. So we believe with the audio, we can really come up with a very good means of interacting in a natural way with driver. Overall, we still believe that to make sure that there is the best communication between the vehicle and the driver, we need to address all senses of drivers. Audible, visual, like head-up display, we believe is a very good technology to keep the eyes on the road while still getting messages and haptic feedback, be it on the steering wheel or be it on touch surfaces, to ensure that there is seamless communication with the driver. So with that, I would like to thank you for your attention and hand back
Thank you,
to
Hans. This is Kip Dodlinger from Garmin.
Good afternoon,
and
everybody.
I will give you guys the hook if you go over.
I will do my best. All right, my name is Kip Dodlinger. I lead product and UX for the Automotive organization at Garmin International. Most people don't understand the full breadth and diversity of the products that Garmin does. If you're a pilot, you've probably are quite familiar with Garmin products because you've probably flown a plane, either a jet or a single-engine aircraft that has Garmin avionics throughout the cockpit, the radar, the autopilot, and the communication systems. If you're fortunate enough to have ever been in the market for a yacht or other big boat, you probably know that Garmin supplies OEMs with the full range of electronics for new boats as well as for retrofit market as well. And of course, you know Garmin, if you are somebody that's an athlete or into fitness, you know that we design a range of wearable devices and other types of products to support both fitness and outdoors. And then, of course, most people know Garmin for automotive. And today what I'm going to talk to you about is hybrid navigation. And hybrid navigation is the combination of onboard capabilities and data with offboard capabilities and data to provide an optimal navigation solution. And the first observation that I want to make is that navigation embedded into the vehicle is still something that's very important in the market. We still see a lot of just as many RFQs, and we see growth in this market for embedded systems. And the reason for that is that connectivity isn't free and connectivity isn't ubiquitous, nor will it be anytime soon. There's still a big market for people that want to have something that's always available, whether there's connectivity or not. But what are the problems that we're trying to solve with the hybrid architecture for navigation? One of the first big ones is that map storage requirements continue to grow. The maps are getting bigger. We are seeing more and more demand from the market as well as from OEMs for things like satellite imagery, enhanced city models, things that make the map look better and also provide an added layer of functionality. And there's new types of data like ADAS data and HD map data that's becoming part of it. Additionally, at the same time, we are seeing a greater demand from the market to keep that data fresh. So we're having more and more data that we want to have embedded on the car, but we need to be able to keep it fresh and accurate, and connectivity isn't cheap, so we need to make sure we do that in a very efficient and smart way. We also see that there are some features that are pushing things like routing itself into the cloud in some situations. So as traffic becomes more granular, as there's other elements that come as part of traffic, as weather becomes part of the routing algorithm, that's more and more data that you would have to send to the car in order for its routing algorithm to take that data into account. And then we're also seeing things like cooperative routing, which inherently have to be done in the cloud. So how do we take advantage of some of these cloud advantages, but at the same time provide the reliability of embedded navigation and keep the data fresh? The observation that I'll point to next, and that I'll use to answer that question, is that 95% or more of miles driven in the US and in Europe are within a few hundred miles from home. So how can we use that information to more intelligently update the data that we choose to store on the vehicle? And I'll use Europe as an example. So if we view Europe as one huge data field with different data layers, a first basic layer would be full name browsing in major roads. So I can do basic search for destinations across the entire continent, as well as do routing on the major roads. The next layer would be all of the data required to do complete end-to-end routing across the continent. The next layer is basic map display, street geometry, other things that you need in order to be able to present a complete map to the end user. Other types of data that is used to help improve routing as well as to improve guidance. The data that you need in order to do voice recognition. And then finally, the data that you need for enhanced map display. So what we end up with, depending on what type of map format we're talking about and what features a system chooses to support, is something that's a very huge storage requirement. But what do you really need? And what do I really need for my normal and mostly local driving routine? Well, first of all, I only need enhanced map data just in the area that's immediately around my car. While I might want to have voice recognition data in a little bit larger area so I can support searches outside of my immediate area. Traffic and ADAS information that exists on board could be in a larger area around my home location, as well as basic map display features so that I can show the bulk of my routes correctly on the interface. And then lastly, routing data for the entire home zone area so that for the 95 to 99% of my miles traveled, I'm able to do perfect routing. And then lastly, we might still, because it's a relatively small amount of data, have full name browsing in major roads across the continent. So what you end up with is something that's on the order of about 20% of what you would typically find in a map for all of Europe today. But what about those times that you take an extended trip? So when I take an extended trip, as long as I stay within what will be shown here as the green zone of my home zone, I don't need to load any data into the system. But as I begin to venture out, on say a longer trip, in this case to Paris, the system begins to load the information that I'll need to have once I reach my destination, as well as loading in from the cloud data along that corridor so that I'll be able to support the navigation as well as any POI information I might need along the way. Over time, the system begins to learn where are the places that I travel, how frequently do I travel to them, and it begins to store and keep that information to whatever storage allotment that I have on board the infotainment system in the vehicle. So that data is then kept and updated on a regular basis as opposed to updating and keeping the data for the entire continent. Then over time, if it fills up and I go to a new city that I've not been to before, you use a FIFO method to simply get rid of that data that's probably no longer needed and replace it with new data. So that is one potential solution that we're looking at for next generation products in order to meet the needs of some of these really highly data intensive hybrid navigation solutions. Thank you.
Jan de Vries from TomTom.
Thank you, Kit. I hope I can make the timing like you did, perfectly on time.
2 seconds.
My actual name is Jan-Maarten de Vries, but since that is very difficult to pronounce, even for myself, I mentioned people can call me JM. In the next 7 minutes or so, I will talk about how we literally map the roads towards autonomous driving, and with that try to accelerate the movement towards this fantastic event in our industry. Actually, the origins of my company, TomTom, are in developing software for navigation systems as well as map making after the acquisition of Taylor Atlas several years ago. But we do realize that both maps and navigation will change significantly in the future world of smarter connected cars, as well as electric vehicles, autonomous vehicles, and mobility services. And especially when this all comes together in a time when we will have mobility on demand, when all these trends will merge into one great event for our industry. One thing we already see is that maps are shifting away from actually having replaced paper maps to help people find their way from one place to the other into a ubiquitous element in a variety of connected devices to enable location-based services. And another thing we see is that also the demands of users, end users, for the usage of these maps and location technologies in all these connected devices is changing dramatically. New generations of people now expect always to be connected wherever they go and to have access to this map content and location technologies in a seamless way for different devices they use throughout their journeys. And when we zoom in on autonomous driving, actually we see another change coming up. The maps and location technologies are changing from being a very proactive element in front of you, giving you instructions, go left, go right, to becoming a more ambient element, ambient component or building block in very complex systems in helping to determine these systems the next decision for the next action. And when it comes to autonomous driving, we actually see 4 essential roles of maps in autonomous vehicles. First of all, navigation will remain. After all, these autonomous vehicles need to find their way from one place to the other and determine the best route. But we do understand that the nature of navigation will change in these autonomous vehicles. It will become more contextual aware, it will be more personalized, the experience. Also, the HMI will be very instrumental in helping people to gain trust in the system, to give information what the system is doing, what it is perceiving in the environment, so that the end user has trust in what the system is doing. But also, navigation will change in terms of what the best route is. The concept of best route will be no longer limited to the fastest route. You may actually prefer a slower route because you can do different things in the car while you go through this route. And then next to navigation, there's another more sophisticated map layer required for 3 roles of the map in autonomous vehicles. First of all, this sophisticated map layer will help the system to do path planning and plan the next move of the vehicle. It will complement the vehicle sensors in doing so. Second, the sophisticated map layer will also complement the vehicle sensors in precisely positioning the vehicle in its lane. So localization content is needed to help the vehicle sensors to determine where that car exactly is. And finally also, this sophisticated map layer can help the car to drive more comfortably, more as a human being, not to brake too abruptly in front of a sharp curve, for instance. For planning, we have developed what we call a high-definition map. This is essentially a border-to-border representation of the road, the geometry of the road, in far more detail than the traditional navigation map. It includes the lane, it includes the lane types, the lane markings, and it is in 3 dimensions, so it includes the height of the road, and it's also far more accurate than the traditional navigation maps. And for this planning map is important to actually provide context to the vehicle sensors. For instance, when a 2-lane road is actually merging in a 1-way road, this is important information that helps the brain of the car actually to determine the next action. But you can also imagine when you are approaching a complex junction or intersection, that actually this high-definition map can provide a certain path to the vehicle that it can drive safely through this complex intersection. And when it comes to localization content, there's actually 2 fundamental methods being used in the industry. One is based on objects, feature-based, so certain buildings or trees around in the road environment can help actually the system, with help of what the sensors see, to determine where the car exactly is. We have developed a different method, which is based on lateral depth maps. So what we've done is we have used the 3D pixel clouds from our mobile mapping vehicles and transformed that into a continuous pattern of the side of the road, where the different colors of that pattern represent the relative distance from the vehicle. And when you compare that lateral depth map, you could see it as a wallpaper on both the left side and the right side of the road with what the vehicle sensors see, you can actually very precisely determine the position of the vehicle in the lane. And this continuous pattern is a robust way of doing that because it's not dependent on changes of the objects on the road. When buildings are removed or trees are cut, it doesn't matter. There's a continuous way of comparing with what the vehicle sensors see with the information you have stored in the vehicle. And then the question is, how do we collect actually all the data to produce this beautiful content? Well, we as TomTom believe very much in the strong combination of using traditional professional map sources, for instance, the information from our mobile mapping vehicles, with community input, with crowdsourced data. And that crowdsourced data is actually crucial when it comes to the future of maintaining all these high-definition maps and localization content, because it's impossible to do that in the traditional way of driving around the roads. What you see behind me is actually the road network of the conglomerate of the Amsterdam city, just built up in one day, using all the GPS traces that we get back from our connected devices that are driving on the road with some kind of TomTom technology inside. But we do believe that this professional mapping content that we collect with our mobile mapping vehicles are still very crucial to be combined with this input source. Why is that? Because you need actually this ground truth, this base map layer that provides the additional information to what the sensor data tell you. And also, it is an additional information point that actually boosts the quality of these high-definition map and that localization content. And also, it can actually function as an arbitration when there's conflict between different input sources, for instance, on certain geometry that has changed. And finally, I would like to show you this video, because I've sensed a lot of optimism in this room with all of us, and I actually share the great vision of having better mobility in the future and having better quality of life in the cities. And I'm sure we get there. But there's a lot of optimism on when we get there. And I tell you, we still have a way to go. We have made a lot of progress as an industry overall, including the mapping side. But if you see this video of an arbitrary crossing in Amsterdam on a rainy day, and you can picture this crossing in different cities as well, there's a crisscrossing of different types of transport. There's bikes, there's pedestrians, there's public transport, there's cars, there's actually aggressive drivers, there's more slowly drivers. And if you had imagined that Range Rover that you saw passing by, actually before it took priority over the Porsche. The Porsche took priority over the Range Rover. If you had imagined that Range Rover was a self-driving car today, it would have probably put itself in safe stop mode and been there for a couple of hours before actually doing the next step. Yeah. So I tell you, there's still a way to go. Are these cities actually ready to move to this next step? And imagine this is Mumbai or New Delhi or Bangkok. We have even a more complex situation. Thank you very much.
Very good. Next we have Giles Rhys Johns from What 3 Words?
Haven't said anything yet. Are we on the... Okay, so mobility is about getting from A to B, right? And to do that, you need the Holy Trinity. You need the 3 things. You need a map, and you need a navigation system, and you need an address. You need to understand where A and B are. And there have been dramatic increases in the sophistication of maps and navigation, real-time satellite imagery, crowdsourced traffic. But the problem is, addressing hasn't changed for hundreds of years. And actually, the world is really badly addressed when you think about it. Talking about location is really challenging. So the UN say that 75% of the countries in the world don't have a well-maintained street addressing system. They don't have postcodes, house numbers, zip codes, any of that sort of stuff. And actually, in the other 25% of the countries that do have decent street addressing, it's still pretty poor, and it's costly and it's frustrating. So coming here on Monday, I typed in the LA Convention Center. The pin dropped in the center of the LA Convention Center. It took me about 5 minutes to kind of wander around and find exactly where I was meant to be going. Now you think of that in terms of an autonomous vehicle. It's going to drive through the middle of the convention center. Can we advance the slide? There we go. I get into my car in London. I type in Church Road. It says, which of the 19 different church roads in London would you like to go to? So we talk about autonomous vehicles and voice navigation, and yet the addressing systems that we have at the moment are just not good enough. So that 5 minutes I spent wandering around, actually, people from the UK spend 22 million hours a year lost whilst they're abroad. It's the #1 cause of arguments when you're traveling. If UPS can stop their drivers getting lost just by a little bit, it represents a huge amount of money. So 1 mile per driver per day is a $50 million saving. And the #1 issue in new cars bought is voice recognition. #5 is navigation. So the world isn't just set up to do this correctly. You could drop a pin, but try and tell someone a pin over the telephone or face-to-face or writing it down, it just can't work. And that's because it's GPS coordinates. Fantastically accurate, much more accurate than street addressing, much more universal than street addressing. But people aren't programmed to to memorize these and to communicate these. You can make slight errors and you end up totally in the wrong place. And so what we've tried to do is come up with a really user-friendly version of coordinates. We have divided the world up into 57 trillion 3-meter by 3-meter squares, and we've given each square a 3-word address. So 3 words to describe any spot on the planet. Words are much easier to remember, they're much easier to communicate, and what we've done in English, we've replicated in 12 other languages as well. So we have a simple algorithm that works offline. You don't need a data connection. It converts GPS coordinates to 3 words and back again. And so that means wherever you are, however remote you are, you can have a very, very simple address. If I search for the stadium in Chicago, the pin drops in the middle. Actually, you can be much more specific about entrances, exits, stuff like that. So this is Pedro. He runs a postal service in the favelas in Brazil. And he uses 3 Portuguese words. So when people check out online, they put in the 3 Portuguese words, and his postmen and postwomen deliver the mail. This is Sizwe. He uses 3 words in the townships in South Africa to deliver prescription medicine. And we're being used in all the places that you would expect that have rubbish addressing. We're being used by the UN, the World Bank, the Red Cross to manage disasters and track diseases. We're also being used much closer to home. Apparently you have a type of rugby, American football, something like that. We were used there to coordinate the security response around the stadiums, because shouting a lat long over a field radio in a crisis situation is really, really challenging. So they use 3 words instead. There's 57,000 fire hydrants in Denver that now have 3-word addresses, because it's a unique identifier as well as a locator. In fact, companies around the world that have difficulty being found are now adding 3-word addresses to their Contact Us pages. And we're being built into mobility apps. So NavMe is the world's largest offline navigation app. You can type in a 3-word address, it will recognize it, and it'll give you turn-by-turn directions to that specific spot. Or TripGo is a city planning app. Same thing, it will take you to a 3-word address. And we're being built into apps and services around the world. We've got our own app, but we've also got code that people are using. Finnish company, Carroom, now allow you to locate parking spots around the city with 3 Finnish words. There's a taxi company in Delhi, horrendously addressed country. Women-only drivers for women-only passengers, and they use 3-word addresses to minimize the amount of time that women spend on the street so they can get picked up and dropped off in the right places. Earlier this year, we signed a deal with the Mongolian Post Office, and they use 3 Mongolian words to deliver letters to their largely nomadic population. So we're on a bit of a mission. The world is really badly addressed. We want to make the world more efficient, less frustrating, and a much safer place. And we believe with 3 words, 3-word addressing, we can do that and make it easy for you to get from A to B, no matter where that might be. A short film to play.
Great. Thank you to all of you. I have a couple questions, and then I think we're going to take some questions from the audience. But I'd like to ask all 4 of you to answer the question, can in-vehicle systems keep up with the innovation and instantaneous speed of market of the smartphone apps? How are you going to keep up with that in your various businesses?
And I think based on the hardware that we have in the vehicles, there is always a constant challenge to have the newest technologies in the core. We have been working faster development processes now so that we are very close to what we see in the smartphone market, for example, with some of the vehicle systems. However, because vehicles are driving typically 10 years or longer on the road, it's going to be a challenge to have a 10-year-old vehicle up to date with the newest technologies. Software-wise, it will happen. So the reflash capabilities will be everywhere in a very short time. However, the hardware limitations is still a challenge. There may be opportunities where you can modularize the components and then buy faster processing power, but the logistics of that and all the verification tests that has to appear before this is enabled is still a challenge for the automotive industry. So we will become faster, software updates will happen, but we will never be exactly at the same level.
I think the plug and play is a good component because once you buy the car with a navigation system, unless there's opportunities for you to pull it out, update it, get it on, people are still going to use their phones. But Kip, what do you think?
Well, yeah, I think that it continues to be and will continue to be an issue from a hardware standpoint, but things are moving faster. But what I would say is that at least from a software feature standpoint and from a content standpoint, some of the things that I talked about, both with more frequent updates of software, not just maps, as well as some features that once existed in the car existing in the cloud. Those features can then be updated at any time, right? And so features can evolve, content can evolve over time at a much more rapid pace than it has in the past. So we'll see a big change where that comes from. And the other thing to keep in mind, which I'm sure people say a lot, which is that what exists in the car has to be much more reliable and dependable than what has to exist in the consumer electronics environment. So I think that's probably obvious, but I think that the opportunities to update software over time are certainly going to be enabled with some of those
You have a
cloud-based.
higher level of responsibility for sure in the car.
Most definitely, yeah.
Yeah?
Well, it is absolutely a challenge, the smartphone, the pace of innovation compared to embedded systems in the vehicle. For all of us in the, let's say, traditional automotive industry. So in that sense, TomTom is a bit of an odd company because we are both in the consumer space and the automotive industry. So the only way to actually cope with the challenge against, let's say, Apple CarPlay and Google Android Auto coming in, including Waze, is to fix the problem of the embedded systems in terms of having a proper integration of functionality, also including ADAS functionality, including things like you presented on hybrid navigation, doing it right for the end user with the right end user experience. And that also requires, I think, that in the traditional automotive industry, software is developed in a different way compared to the past. Less the V-cycle and more the agile way of developing software and decoupling software from the hardware. And I talk now about the context of navigation, infotainment systems. The whole thing will change again when we move towards autonomous driving, because then the role of the smartphone will completely change compared to this traditional space. So then the smartphone becomes something different to the car than what it is now in terms of challenging through Google Android Auto and Apple CarPlay.
So I think we see that when we talk to more traditional car manufacturers. We talk to a number of them. The time it takes to get into to get into a car is phenomenal. Whereas you talk to people who come from the software and the app side, and they build us in an afternoon. I think there's a kind of big mindset shift between actually we need to kind of fail fast, move forward, innovate, trial, error, and kind of move on and innovate, versus some of the more traditional kind of ways of getting it perfect, putting it to market.
I think if I was out in the boondocks, I'd want to use what 3 words, because there may not be a Google Maps out there. I'm going to take, I don't know how much more time we have. I have one more question, but I'd rather hear from the audience. I'm sure, sir, would you identify yourself and your question?
Sure. My name is John Parsons. I'm a VP of Engineering at Nobility. We're a software development company right here in Southern California. And Ann, I'm like you. When I get in the car, the most important thing after the car key is Waze, and TomTom and Garmin and all these great products over the years. I love you guys. So my question is this, though. All the focus seems to be on the idea of the convenience features. I'm driving to grandma's house. Where can I get food along the way? It's kind of a hard thing to ask, but all of these technologies are very siloed. Are there any standards to glue this together in the case of an emergency, like a natural disaster, if we had an earthquake, tornado, maybe a terrorist attack? I don't know if my Waze drivers out there are going to be tapping for the right icon or saving their butt if something really urgent's happening. So is there anything that's in the works as an industry standard or anything that somebody out there is curating this in real time so that it gets me away from the trouble instead of notices the 110 just opened up and sends me to the center of it?
Who likes to take that one?
Well, yeah, as far as I know, there's not a real standard being developed for catastrophes like mentioned by you, but the answer to it is having a proper system of real-time information in place, using car sensor data, using community input, and using more traditional sources like government sources, for instance, and combine all of that, fuse that in an intelligent way, and deliver back a real-time service to the customer, being you in that case. That's, I think, the only answer to it. And when you have a quality service that works, then I think you will not be driven into this earthquake, you will be driven away from it.
Fantastic.
May I just add one aspect as you reference Waze? What I showed with the e-Horizon is an automatic system that leverages sensors in the core that will automatically trigger information. With Waze today, you still need to rely on, is there enough Wazers around that push the button? Do they really push the button? So it's, in our opinion, a higher probability in the end to leverage most of the cores running around with their automated systems to provide such type of information that can be used.
So we see a lot of that because we're used in disaster zones. And every country's got a very different addressing system. Most of the apps have a slightly different way of referring to a location. And so having a set of standards for addressing would certainly help that. And the intention is that a system like ours kind of allows anybody from wherever they are on whatever device to have a single way to talk about it.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions? I have one. Any out there? It's hard to see. Over here? So what will navigation look like in the future? We've been talking about this, but especially I'm interested in with the emergence of V2V and V2I. You know, a good example of V2V is there a car slams out its brakes, and does it send out a signal to those behind it, you know, watch out, I'm putting my brakes on. And then V2I, of course, would be where the traffic signal communicates to the cars that the green light is about to turn to yellow and they need to slow down. One of my big customers is the city of Los Angeles, and they have sensors all over the entire infrastructure of Los Angeles is censored. So it's interesting to me how the navigations will hook into the V2V or to V2I.
Yeah. Basically, as I said before, the vehicle will have to rely on various channels to communicate to the outside world. V2V, DSRC is a technology that is heavily promoted. It's not yet there. Cellular connections is going to be standard in all new cars very soon in the US and in many other countries as well. I was talking about Wi-Fi. So basically, I think we need to leverage all available technologies as an industry, be it from vehicle to vehicle, be it to some type of infrastructure to get as many data out of the core and into the core as possible.